The Avenue 5 is a first-class passenger spacecraft currently on a journey of Mars and Saturn that will last for 8 weeks. The spaceship is owned by the eccentric millionaire Herman Judd, and it is now carrying over 5,000 wealthy tourists who wish to see the solar system. Ryan Clark, the Avenue 5 captain, is a seasoned space travel veteran and the leader of the world's greatest space crew. Additionally, Avenue 5 features an unbreakable shield that blocks off dangerous radiation and an endless supply of oxygen that can last for up to 3 years. But one day, due to a simple mistake, the lives of all 5,000 passengers are in jeopardy. Judd, the owner, is notoriously juvenile, and he intends to prove it by hosting the galaxy's largest yoga session. For this reason, he organizes a yoga session on the ship's dock attended by roughly 1,000 guests. This causes problems for the ship and an overload on the harbor. Billie, one of the ship's engineers, disobeys a warning notice and causes a gravity flip. That's why everyone on board the ship gets hurled to one side of the craft. Disarray sets in as several of them get life-threatening injuries from fallen objects. After many minutes of this, our previous engineer, Billie, pulls a lever and brings everything back under control. Finally, the ship's gravity returns, but not before another engineer, Joe, is murdered while working on repairs outside. Captain Clark issues a statement thereafter, asking for quiet. He assures them that the shake was small and that they have everything under control. But little did he know the fate that awaited him and the Avenue 5. Clark continued attempting to get in touch with Joe, the engineer, after the announcement, despite the fact that he knows Joe is dead. Just then, Billie walks up to him and drops a bombshell on him. She first warns that the impact of 5,000 people slamming into one side of the spaceship will have a knock-on effect. Then she says that Joe, the engineer, perished when the gravity switched. Incredulous with this news, Clark storms off in a huff. The control room at Judd Galaxy's Earth headquarters watches the events unfold in dread. In a scan of the vessel, Mission Chief Rav Mukler discovers catastrophic information. The Avenue 5 has gone off course due to the domino effect and can't turn around. Previously, its voyage was expected to last 8 weeks, but now it will take 3 times as long. Rav gathers his staff in the conference room, including Judd, his assistant, Iris, and the rest of the people affected by the news. Captain Clark's British accent comes out in the midst of the crisis, and he begins rambling. "Cut, please, and insert here, they were all taken aback by this news, since they had believed he was American." During this point, Clark reveals the truth. A British actor hired to inspire the ship's staff and guests comes clean about his true identity. This implies he has no knowledge how to pilot a starship and that all the tales of his bravery throughout the cosmos are fabrications. When Judd and the others hear this, they become enraged and demand to know who the true captain is. Clark whispers back that it was the recently deceased engineer Joe. Because of his poor social abilities, Joe employed him. In the following scene, Clark, still revered as a hero by the travelers, and Billie, the ship's engineer, make a public statement. They say the Avenue 5 veered off track, and it might take 3 years to get back. But Captain Clark reassures them that they are entirely safe and that the engineers are working tirelessly to clear a passage. Once bidding farewell to Engineer Joe, an inquisitive passenger named Karen wants more explanations, and Clark agrees to fill her in after they've given Joe a good send-off. Because no one on the spacecraft thought anything bad was going to happen, no coffins were brought aboard. However, Judd's egocentric nature has led him to bring along his own, a solid gold one. Iris, his assistant, asks him to contribute money to Joe's burial, and he grudgingly agrees. Eventually, when Clark is acting as captain in the control room, a shorts-clad engineer named Cyrus enters with a tablet and announces that he has discovered a quicker way to Earth. If his estimates are correct, they might be back in their own country in as little as 6 months. Clark tells Judd the good news, and Judd quickly orders him to tell the passengers. Billie, however, disagrees. Since Cyrus has a history of exaggeration, she offers they do some tests on the computation. Unluckily, Clark leaked the news to the gossip Karen, who spread it to the rest of the office. Later, at the burial service for Joe, the engineer, Billie cautions Clark that the hefty casket may be an issue, but he brushes her off. Sometime later, the casket is blasted into space, but its immense mass causes the spaceship's orbit to begin to rotate. So now they have to take Joe the engineer's casket with them everywhere they go. In another part of the world, Mission Chief Rob is meeting with NASA officials to lobby for a rescue mission. Soon later, Rob gives Judd a call and demands an explanation for the harrowing events on the Avenue 5. The goal is to get NASA on board with the rescue effort as quickly as feasible by appealing to their sense of compassion. Unfortunately, Judd's egocentric claims that they've solved the problem and can return in as little as 6 months are not to be believed. After he cusses with NASA and tells them to frick off, he cuts off the transmission. Unfortunately, things deteriorated even worse on the following day. 3 people who were hurt in the previous knock-off accident have now died. This time around, Billie crafts the caskets herself, making them as light and see-through as possible to prevent them from circling the spacecraft. Gravity within the spaceship is temporarily weakened while the burial service continues and the coffins are ready for flight. The passengers don't plummet to the ground as previously, but they do remain airborne for a time. The caskets, on the other hand, are transported outdoors very slowly since they don't have enough power for the launch. Joe's gold casket has joined them in orbit around Avenue 9. It's only that these 3 coffins are see-through, so you can see the bodies inside. The next morning, Clark visits the dining area and observes the growing influence Karen has among the passengers. Moreover, he sees that the current head of customer relations, Matt Spencer, isn't doing anything except making things worse. As a result, he decides to call Karen into his office for a productive discussion. They have a wine and cheese discussion on the latest news afterwards. Unfortunately, Clark still has trouble controlling himself and ends up mimicking a British accent. When his secret is finally revealed, he admits the truth: he's not the captain. This, unsurprisingly, infuriates Karen, and she threatens to tell the other passengers. Clark, though, eventually soothes her and gives her the position of senior liaison officer. Her job is to chit-chat with customers and reassure them that everything is okay, and that they may go home soon. To win over Karen's skepticism, Clark offers her the use of his presidential suite. Sometime later, as Clark walks down the corridor, the earlier mentioned engineer, Cyrus, approaches him with some unpleasant news. He admits that the previous time he returned in 6 months, he erroneously estimated the spaceship's mass and now knows better. The initial return time has increased by 6 months, bringing the total estimated time back to within 3 years. This suggests that Avenue 5's trip back to Earth will take around 3.5 years. There is, however, a means by which both the bulk and the time commitment might be diminished. They could get into orbit more quickly if they could just throw 500 people into space. But, unsurprisingly, Clark instantly turns down the proposal. He subsequently introduces himself to Karen, the new liaison officer, and gives her a rundown of the issue. He gives her strict instructions on how to break the news to the throng without inciting a disturbance. When asked to tell a narrative, Karen comes up with an emotive one that gets the crowd applauding even after she says they'll be home in 3.5 years. Meanwhile, Clark makes the choice to act independently. He visits the spaceship's command center to inquire about developments with the engineers. Surprisingly, though, they all seem to have remembered the identical responses. Now Cyrus has arrived to disclose that all these engineers are only actors playing the part for money. Judd recruited them so they might woo the passengers with their beauty. When Clark hears this, he becomes angry and starts shouting in British again, exposing himself to the other performers. When he's finished venting, Billie pulls up the carpet and opens the door to the tight basement. Several folks may be seen typing away at computers in that area. As Billie explains, they are the spaceship's true engineers. She and Cyrus have been working covertly with them from the very beginning. This new information throws Clark further into doubt on the veracity of Avenue 5. Next, he joins the guys in the basement for some after-work beer pong. He is surprised to see that, despite their dire circumstances, they are composed and cheerful individuals. Judd throws a party in his suite afterwards to cheer everyone up. He's joined by Karen, Clark, and Iris, and they immediately begin plotting out a public relations campaign. They wish to reassure those on Earth of their safety and good fortune. Clark and Iris come up with clever schemes, but Judd, being Judd, rejects them all and instead suggests they pose with the kids beside the wetsuit bin. This section serves as both the spaceship's radiation shield and its primary viewing platform. To what does the shield owe its protection? So what if it smells bad? It's only human waste. Hundreds of travelers, especially children, rush to the location to get the best photo possible. For further realism, Judd has an extra come up and push a random button. Frank, Karen's husband, steps forward and offers to help out. The turd shield is compromised when they both happen to pass past a random star at the same time, whose gravity is strong enough to tear through the protective barrier. This results in a rapid increase in the frequency with which people defecate. Now the oxygen level is dropping rapidly, and if something isn't done, everyone will perish. The people on board still hold Captain Clark in high esteem, so they urge him to take action. Being cornered, he gives in begrudgingly. Engineers then outfit him up in a spacesuit and equip him with a communication device before releasing him from the vessel. Clark keeps floating erratically, embarrassing the passengers within Avenue 5 and drawing attention from the rest of the globe. Even yet, with guidance from the experts, he locates the point where the turd shield has broken. To halt the overflow, he need only turn the lever. The process is made more difficult by the fact that the lever is stuck and the force of the feces is pushing on the surrounding area. Thankfully, Billie shows there and the two of them work together to shut the lever and prevent the overflow. Everyone celebrates, and Captain Clark becomes an instant celebrity, much to Billie's chagrin because she was just as useful. This prevents a disaster, but the human waste that was sent into space has begun to orbit the vessel as well. That night, Avenue 5 was meant to celebrate the conclusion of their 4th week in orbit with a midway home celebration. Since they will be there for the next 3.5 years and the party facilities have already been reserved, they settle on celebrating only the quarter of the way home. To lighten the mood, an aspiring stand-up comedian called Jordan is invited to the stage, but his jokes are either terrible or often interrupted by the audience. Frank, Karen's husband, who is almost in the middle of the mob, is getting death threats from other passengers who blame him for the feces event since he pressed the button. Drunken Judd begins to agree with their demand that he be expelled from the spacecraft. A group of security guards soon show there and haul Frank away in handcuffs. They seem serious about throwing him out of the spaceship. Karen begs Judd not to, but he ignores her. Thankfully, the now very respected Clark takes the stage before Frank is fired and asks the audience to keep calm. He then explains that the event wasn't caused by Frank at all, but rather by the gravity of a nearby star. After saying this, Judd agrees with his recommendation that they bring Frank back. When Clark finally lets Frank go, Frank doesn't thank him. Instead, he hits him in the jaw. Actually, he has begun to accuse the captain of cheating on his wife due to the constant proximity of the two of them. While back on Earth, Rob is watching the party tape and is filled with optimism that everyone will survive. Ultimately, the episode concludes with her making her way to the Oval Office to seek aid from President Obama.